the windshield wiper motor is mounted. Now I've got to figure out the rest of it. I think I'm going to have to hit the forum and get some instruction on this because the instructions I got with the system are very cryptic. Well, good morning. We're back at it on the Cobra. That is from the fumes from yesterday's priming. We're back on the Cobra, and what we're going to be doing today is beginning the most detailed and intensive part of the build, in my personal opinion. That is the wiring. First thing we're going to do is we're going to mount all of the harness and the PCM for the ProFlow 4 Edelbrock fuel injection system, and then we're going to start mapping out the body harness. This is going to take several days, as still waiting on information on the dash and things like that, so I can mount my gauges and stuff like that. But we're going to start doing the preliminary stuff today. Okay, what we have here at the beginning of the harness, this is the this connects to the distributor, to the coil, and to the idle air controller. So these are the first preliminary things I'm going to start working on. I also have to work on the vacuum outlet on the fuel system. I've got my PCM, main wiring harness, auxiliary wiring harness, and some other things, and of course instructions, all very important. So we're going to start mounting this stuff up. Initially, I think I'm going to mount the PCM in this area. Got plenty of room to do so there, so let's get to it. Alright, just a status update. I've started doing the preliminary connections. This is my O2 sensor. I haven't gotten to that yet. I've got the 8 fuel injectors rather wired, and the fuel pressure sensor, the idle air controller, which is back here. This is the map sensor. This is the throttle position sensor. One thing I've learned on this already, just a little tidbit on Fords, or actually there's two things. One, the distributor connections for a Ford, since the distributor is in the front, and for a Chrysler, has an extension harness that you have to add to it so you can get the plugs back to where the ECM is. Now, what that also necessitates, unfortunately, is I'm going to have to lengthen the coil wires to reach my coil, which is no big deal. It's just a simple matter of snipping and extending the cables. But this extension harness is necessary because of the location of the distributor, because otherwise the plug will be right there, and the main harness plug would be right there, and that's not going to work, obviously, because the ECM is back here. The other thing I noted is I figured out how to release these clips, and it's actually better on the right side of the engine on a Ford because of the heater hoses and the way I've got the fuel system done. It's better and easier if these hoses are not present, if they're not in position. So I think I'm going to unplug these, route them under there, and make that a little bit neater. But if these hoses are not in location, it's a lot easier to get to the injectors. Okay, now these cables right here are routed under the fuel rail, so they're a little bit neater in a way. This position sensor right here, this is actually not a position sensor, this is the air temperature sensor. What I have to do is I have to drill a 3/4 inch hole in the bottom of my air cleaner. That will mount to the bottom of the air cleaner to monitor the temperature of the air input. So let's get to that. Okay, this is an area where you have to get a little bit of creative. This is the air temperature sensor that you have to drill the 3/4 inch hole in, put the grommet in, then move that through there. This is a very small air cleaner. This is the Stelling and Helling air cleaner that 427 Cobras came with. I'm using it due to hood clearance issues underneath the hood because I'm trying to go without a hood scoop. Now, the problem is the filter is thick, and this is where the filter sits, and most air cleaners have a little bit of space here, whereas this one does not. What I've had to do is I have to go in and trim this just a little bit to where it will fit right in there, just like that. Now, after trimming it in, it is in location. Everything is good to go. Alright, back again. The PCM is mounted, hooked up to the main harness. I've just got these tethered together for now. I'm going to neaten all of that up later. This connection right here, since this is a truck mounted battery, this is to the positive and negative, or excuse me, this is actually a fuel pump connector. I've got to get some instruction on that because Edelbrock actually has some conflicting information. If you're using the fuel system, some instructions say it needs to go straight to the ignition, whereas on this particular item it's got the fuel pump connection. So I need to determine which of those would work. It looks like it will connect. I've just got to verify that. The fuse and the relay are mounted where I can get to them in case I ever blow a fuse. This right here is the positive and negative lead. This goes to the back of the car into the trunk because that hooks that up. This goes to the ignition switch. So I've got to, when I drill holes for the main body harness to come through, it will do that. The injectors, of course, are hooked up. Distributor's hooked up. Coil, I've got to get some wire and extend the connections that I showed earlier to get those to run all the way up to the front. So we're working on that. I also, if you can see that blue hose there, I've got the vacuum hooked up to the throttle body for the EFI for reference there. So we're plodding along, getting this straightened out. On the Cobra today, the list of items that I'm going to start working on today is first of all, I've received a new battery mount. If you recall, the battery mount that came with this Cobra kit was basically a plastic tray with a nylon tie-down strap. Would have worked, would not have looked good, and to be honest with you, not a big fan of it. So I decided to try to find something new. I'm using a Optima yellow top, the deep dive battery. So I found a battery tray that specifically addresses this battery. So I'll show you that in just a moment. Also, we're going to start the preliminary work on the body harness, and I've got some wiring to finish up on the EFI harness as well. But let's take a look at this battery tray. Okay, this is much better than the one that came with the actual car. It is made out of billet aluminum that is ball milled. The bottom tray mounts hard to the trunk floor, and it ties together and clamps it into place. It has provisions for the top post, as you can see, and of course the side posts are very clear as well. So just a much cleaner mount. Of course, I'll have to pull it back out when I get ready to carpet, but this basically mounts it in place. It's very sturdy, no problems. Very happy with that. All right, what we've done here is, if you recall from the last video, we had this wire here that was supposed to run to the back to the battery. And if you can see that black and red wire right there, those are run back to the battery now. I've cleaned this cluster of wires up back here. Those will not be visible once I'm finished with that. I've also extended the harness for the coil, which are these right here. And as soon as I get some loom in tomorrow, I will neaten all of that up. I had 1/2 inch loom, but I needed 1 inch because of the number of wires I've got there. So all of that is done. With the exception of this, which I'm not sure if I need, because this goes to monitoring software, and this is supposed to be Bluetooth to a Android pad. I may not need this. These wires right here are to the fans. I will only use one fan, so I need that wire there. This wire is not needed, and this one, which is labeled tack, will of course go to the tachometer. So these two wires will be hooked up whenever I get the tack and I get the fan in. This goes to the ignition, so that is not ready yet because that goes to the body harness. Everything else is hooked up to the PCM. All of the sensors are hooked up, so all of that is good to go. Okay, and more wiring progress using the torch and solder pellet method. I have got my ground cable from the battery hooked up and ready to go. So at this end, both battery cables are completed and are ready to go. So we don't have any more of that to go. Now I am ready to start hooking up the body harness in earnest. I think I may go ahead and mount the windshield wiper motor first, however. And with that, the windshield wiper motor is mounted. Now I've got to figure out the rest of it. I think I'm going to have to hit the forum and get some instruction on this, because the instructions I got with the system are very cryptic. To be continued. Okay, here we are on another day, working on the Cobra still. And I think I just completed what has been so far the biggest pain in the ass of the entire endeavor. Okay, as you can see, the windshield wipers are mocked up and ready to go. This is really a pain because you have to buy this, which is 3/8 aluminum line that you flare on each end. You have to install the gearing inside of this and the cam mechanism to attach to the cable. With lithium grease, you feed the cable through this. It actually goes into these connections right down here. I don't know if I can see that. Yes, if you can see that on both sides, and those bolt to the body. So that section is finally in the car. I've taken all my measurements 14 times, made sure of it, and we are ready to go on that. And now that I got some 1-inch loom in, I have managed to loom up these wires here. Those back there, those are plugs. They're going to have to stay tied, but I've got that all nice and neatened up. Plus the hood comes up to this far, so it's going to cover a lot of that up. But that's neatened up nice and neat now. So I'm pronouncing the EFI harness ready to go. Everything is hooked up, everything's routed nice and neatly, it's ready to go. And now I've managed to drill holes in the mount and got the fuse box mounted. So it is good to go as well, down here where you can actually see it, and it's really close to the steering column, but it does not contact. Everything's cleared, so that's done there. I'm getting real close to calling it a day, maybe putting an end to this video, because I do have a long weekend ahead of me. I am traveling to get ready to do the 32 Ford. Now this may look like a jumbled spaghetti mess, but it really makes sense to me, because what I'm doing is I'm just laying the routing of the wiring out. What I've got here is I've got 3 branches of the harness that go under the hood. Those go there. These here go under the dash. It's already plugged into the fuse box. This right here is the rear body harness. So we are slowly but surely getting this mapped out, getting it ready to go. This one that I tossed to the center of the engine, that's going to run down this frame rail right here and go and branch out to the front, because this also has my headlights, parking lights, and all of those connections on it. This one that goes back here, this is third brake light, hot and ground. Not sure if I'm going to use that. The only way you can mount a third brake light on these without doing a lot of modifications is on a license plate frame. Not even sure that'll work, so that remains to be seen. These are my rear lights right here. Brake lights, parking lights, signal lights, and everything. Under the dash, all of this, you've got gauge feeds, main feeds, feeds to the wiper motor, which of course is right there. So all of this is separately. I might have to separate some of that stuff out. Headlight switch, things of that nature. Now the way I always process this is I do a rough layout of the harness. It's getting a little bit late at night here. It's about 7 o'clock. This is the last night I'm going to be able to work. So before I go to where the 32 is and get that done, then I will be back and do some more work later in the weekend. But this is a good stopping point right here, because it's basically has roughed in where everything goes. I haven't started cutting, splicing, mounting, anything like that. The only thing I've got in place is the plug in to the fuse box, which the fuse box is mounted, and I've got a general idea of where each branch of the harness goes. This is a fairly simple harness, much easier than the F100 was, because I'm not running air conditioning, I'm not running power steering or power brakes, I'm not running any electrical other than the charging system and the lights. I'm not running any heating. Well, I do have a heater, so I do have to run hot to the heater. But other than that, it's a very, very basic system with only about 10 or 15 circuits at most. So this should be pretty easy. We're going to call this video right now. Thank you for joining me. Coming up next, and I know I've been promising this for a couple of weeks, but this is actually the weekend that I am going to go and attempt to paint the 32. So I'm gathering up my supplies to go to that. I am leaving, let's see, today is, I think today is like May 15th, May 16th, something like that. This weekend is when I go and paint the 32. So we'll get back on the Cobra after that, and of course I'll have a video coming up on the 32 as well. Hopefully that goes well. My first ever car paint job, so we'll see how it goes. Thanks a lot. Please hit the subscribe button. We actually have been, we broke 300 subscribers. We're in the 330 range now. Appreciate all the new people that are joining us. Be sure and stay tuned. Lots more good stuff coming.